Hello everyone. Today's video is going to be a guide on making Oberon builds. For those of you who don't know, I'm an Oberon main. If you do the math on my use of stats and hours played, I've used Oberon for about 4.8 thousand hours. So I thought it would be a good idea to share what I know. Let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is what makes Oberon worth using, because that dictates how I make most of my builds. It's hard to explain in as much detail as I want to, so I'll simplify it. Oberon is a jack of all trades, so you generally want to focus on doing as much as possible with him. There are exceptions to that, like my breed sword build, but the general guideline is that you want to focus on doing as much different things as possible. Following that guideline, I think there are two main categories of Oberon build: Smite Oberons and Reckoning Oberons. That may sound odd, but I'll explain our reasoning by talking about his abilities. I'll start with Renewal. It's a team heal with status cleanse, and it even has a death protecting augment. Because of that, Renewal is always good to have. It's always really good to have. Mainly because Renewal is really good to have, Hallowed Ground is also good for giving Renewal its armor buff. Smite and Reckoning are both great abilities, but they're not good as consistently as Renewal is, and Hallowed Ground. Smite, for example, is mainly good because it's a one-handed ability, meaning you can cast it while shooting and reloading, which inflicts scaling damage and stats effect. Generally, it's not going to be good for something like a melee setup. Reckoning, on the other hand, is a wide-range crowd control of armor removal. Enemies not having all armor to remove, or not having a need for crowd control makes it less useful. In preparation for this video, I made two builds to represent the two main categories of Oberon builds. These builds are made to be basic and customizable, which is actually why I tested them without a helmet ability. If you want something that you can experiment with while being effective, these are the builds I recommend. Start by explaining the basic Smite build. It's a health tanking build, so you use Renewal to heal you and get armor. The secret sauce of this build is Smite with more reconstruct. Like I said earlier, you can use Smite without interrupting your shooting or reloading. As long as your melee isn't your main weapon, you can cast it without losing DPS. It'll crowd control and weaken enemies while doing scaling damage, and because of Molt Reconstruct, it'll greatly improve your healing rate and that of allies in affinity range. Again, I recommend replacing Reckoning with your choice of helmet ability on this build. Strength for Smite and Renewal are really good for the sword build as well as a bit of range. And then you can put on other mods to be tanky. The basic Reckoning build works regardless of your choice of weapon, but I would say that it's harder to use due to not having as much investment into tankiness or shield gating. Still, I think it has enough collective survivability for most people to handle it in base steel path. There's not a whole lot to say about the gameplay. You use Renewal to boost your survivability, and then you use the combination of Hallowed Ground and Reckoning to remove armor, while simultaneously crowd controlling enemies. For a Reckoning build, you really want range as well as enough strength for armor removal, and then see what other functionality you can squeeze in. To provide further inspiration, I'm going to show 7 of my min-max builds. 2 of them will be Smite builds, 2 of them will be Reckoning builds, and 3 will be builds that use both. Let's start with what I consider to be my best build, Alpha Demon. This is what I classify as a Reckoning Oberon, although Pathful Advance is the main star of the show. Mainly because the level's power is normally too high to need armor removal, but there is a point where it helps a lot. The main gameplay loop of this build is to shoot enemies with Rana to build up combo, and then to immediately use Raffle advance to heavy attack. So yeah, it's a pretty simple gameplay loop. This build is really all about doing that as quickly as possible. So if you wonder like why not do this on Collarbone, first of all, First of all, you get to support your teammates a bit more with Renewal and Phoenix Renewal, but also it is just much faster well, not faster, but it's much quicker to play with using shield gating as your main source of ability. It's mainly shield gating and the momentary vulnerability. As you can probably see, I don't get enough shields per cast to really immediately have a long shield gate, but yeah, it's enough to be able to survive with, especially since I have Phoenix Renewal. You can see that it's just not a problem here on Ma, even with all the damage that they deal. So yeah, that's my Albacore build. The other Reckoning build that I like to show is Predator. This is a very tanky build, enough to survive 2 hours of MUT, which kind of surprised me. Since no direction was sacrificed for this build, it's really easy to spread around hallowed ground for more powerful range on Reckoning, because Reckoning's range is larger than hallowed grounds. Lycosun generates health ores for equilibrium and health conversion, so overall it's a very strong build. If Reckoning ever got buffed to work kind of like Fractured Blast, this sort of build would be really powerful. Now for my Smite builds. The first one is Flame Lord, and the idea for this build is very similar to my basic Smite build, but more focused on making allies tanky. Renewal provides constant healing and armor, while Elemental Ward provides health. You still use Smite for healing, but I also added Smite Infusion because more damage is good. Because this is more of a min-max loadout, I use Photon Overdrive Tentac Glaxion in order to generate more energy orbs, which lets me get that moat reconstruct healing even when I'm not actively taking damage. So basically I don't have to rely on Hunter's Adrenaline to refill my energy. For my other Smite build, we have Vindicator. It's an odd Smite build because it's also a melee build, but I'm mainly using it for Smite Infusion. This build is not only very tanky, but it also uses Pillage for shield gating as well as armor removal. And then it deals some good damage from having a Smite Infusion buff melee. The range is low, but with the high duration, it is fairly easy, in my opinion, to keep the Smite Infusion buff on allies. Now to a few of the other builds, starting with Starburst. This is the Breach Surge build that I was talking about. And this is also the rare case where I think it's ideal to replace Renewal. This is a full damage build using Vigor Slap to buff Smite's damage which then also creates research sparks, which are then also boosted again by vigorous swap, causing a double dip effect. Armor removal is needed for this to work optimally, so the only thing I could replace was renewal. Now you could use this combo, same sort of combo on Wisp, but the difference between using it on Wisp and Oberon is that Wisp is much easier to survive with this sort of build, while Oberon has armor removal to go with it, so it's a lot more of a glass cannon sort of setup. The next build we have is Power Eternalist. Even though I have ended up using it for a lot of different content, I made this build to be my Kuba Survivor build. It has enough crowd control to direct the Kuba Harvesters without having so much crowd control that it disrupts spawn. Gloom basically turns Smite into lockdown crowd control, but if I ever need more, Reckoning is there to provide that. I also do have Smite Fusion for damage and Phoenix Removal for those rare times where I take enough damage to die. Or rather take enough hits to die because I don't get hit often. My weapon of choice on this is Paragale has enough power to not need armor removal, while also using, what's the mod called, Sharpshooter, to constantly provide me with enough energy to spam Smite. That left Hallowed Ground as the only ability to replace. Now the last build I have is Basic Hybrid, which is a bit different from my other basic builds, which is in that it's not very customizable and stuff, but it's basic in the sense that it doesn't use a helmet ability. It's the only build that I have that I think is ideal without a helmet ability. And it's also harder to play than my other basic builds. But it squeezes out about as much functionality as possible out of Oberon Space Kit. It's hard for me to recommend this build, but when played right, it's really potent. It has damage buffing, it has Phoenix Renewal, it has armor removal, and it deals good damage to Smite. So yeah, I squeezed out a lot of functionality of this build. Like I said, it's hard to play, but very potent. Likely noticed through my various build showcases, I have a ton of different Oberon builds that I haven't shown. I wanted to show more in this video, but I just wouldn't be able to do it without making it excessively long. If you want to see more, please consider checking out my Oberon Helmets Showcase series. Each video is about a specific helmet ability on Oberon, showcasing one or more builds. I hope you enjoyed this one, and please let me know if you'd like to see something that I didn't include here, or even if you'd just like to see something showcased in more detail. That's all for this video, so thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.